Welcome to the Spokane Homeless Coalition, Julie. So, what do you got for us today? You want to talk about scattered site?
I want to talk about scattered site shelters, and I want to introduce our director of scattered site shelters, Dan Simonson. We have a little slideshow as well.
All right, should be good.
How do I get this?
Rob's on it. So, any advice for fatherhood?
There really is no book, no manual. It's really kind of rough, actually, but we'll get through it.
Yeah,
I have
okay.
confidence in you.
Okay, good.
And when you mess up, it's not gigantic.
It's not
You
that
will.
big. Am I going to catastrophize it and just...
Well, let's hope not. You got a good support system.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Sorry for that little segue. Scattered site shelters.
So scattered site shelters are not a new model to homeless services, but they're a newer model in our community. This is a picture of the front of our scattered site shelter that's on Cedar. And that shelter prioritizes elderly, disabled, and medically fragile individuals. That does not mean that is the only population that stays there, but that's our prioritization. We have a second scattered site shelter at the Morning Star Baptist Church on Rowan, and both of those shelters hold 30 people every night. This is just the definition of what a scattered site shelter model is. It's not a traditional congregate shelter. It's not in a traditional congregate space, and it's designed to be smaller. From Camp Hope and running and closing of Camp Hope, we learned a lot of things about the impact that these kind of shelters have on the neighborhoods in which they exist in. And we've also learned what has less impact. And we've seen a lot less impact on the two neighborhoods that we exist in because our process is a little bit different than the traditional warming center. This is a referral-only program, which means that you have to call in to a referral line, and the person answering that referral line, Dana, will direct you to which center best serves your need. There are some pros and cons with scattered site shelters. So it is able to provide individual care because there's 30 guests. So peer support and case management can be done on an individual basis, and it leads to appropriate outcomes and appropriate interventions instead of trying to manage an entirely huge shelter full of people with all different issues. One of the main things that Jules Helping Hands believes is how we begin to move the needle in homeless services is to separate some of the populations and get them appropriate care for what is their ailment or issue or barrier at that time. This is just one model. There needs to be more of these everywhere, but our model deals with medically fragile folks. It's a lower staff to guest ratio. It has a little bit more privacy and autonomy, and the one thing that it does is promote community engagement. The community in which we're existing in is participating in the care of these folks. And that's something we haven't seen in a very long time in our community, is the community engagement. And absolutely 100% of building scattered site shelters depends upon community engagement. And that gets us to the cons. The cost effectiveness. If there isn't community engagement and community participation, this model is not effective. It does not lower the cost of sheltering folks. And that's where we need to, as a community, look to what parts can we participate in and what we're really good at, and narrowing down our scope of service to this specific population, whether that is elderly and disabled, or people in recovery, or mental health. there's so many providers that provide this scope of work, and this is just our scope of work. The coordination of service is one of the cons, because service providers are now providing care at individual facilities instead of going to one, serving everybody at the time that they see them. It is a little bit harder to coordinate the services, and the number one is always community resistance. Nobody wants to hear that they're getting a shelter in their neighborhood, that it's scary for everybody. We've seen big congregate shelters, we've seen Camp Hope and what that looked like, and people in our community may not be educated on what homelessness actually looks like. It's disabled folks who die on our streets every single day because they don't have access to shelters. The folks that stay at our shelter have nowhere else to go because they don't fit into our current shelter system. If you cannot perform your own ADLs, you aren't eligible for any shelter in our system. And that means the highest population of growing in homelessness is elderly. Where do these folks go? And how do we provide a continuum of care that is rare and brief? One of the things that really benefits scattered site shelters is the community engagement. At our two shelters, our guests participate twice weekly in a community cleanup, which means you will see them out in their Kubota, and they're cleaning up the neighborhood in which we exist in. They're helping neighbors mow their lawns. They're participating as community members, not those people experiencing homelessness, Tom and John that live down the road at this specific location. It brings the human aspect of people experiencing homelessness to the community that they're engaged in. And it's also absolutely 100% necessary in providing the care at a cost-effective price to our taxpayers, is using and utilizing those services that already exist in our community. So in these pictures here, you'll see we've done some upgrades in the buildings in which we're in. We've taken out the carpet and put in linoleum floors, makes it more sanitary. And all of these things have been donated and provided by the community. Those are volunteers who came out and installed that floor, and volunteers that paid for. It doesn't always have to come from the City of Spokane. It needs to come from the community of Spokane. Our guests have created this garden for their community. We can't cook at our centers. So they've created a community garden to give back to the community members that live in our neighborhood. These are just some pictures of our shelters. It's not necessarily what every scattered site shelter should look like, but you can see it's a more family-driven, community-driven organization in these spaces. The mill trains for our food cost is gigantic. Any one of you who runs a shelter understands that food costs are absolutely enormous and a big part of budgets. When you're able to utilize volunteers like we have in the community, we start to see the community members stepping up and participating. Every single night, a hot meal is delivered to our center, to our guests from the community, which has cut our food costs down to 17 cents per person for 3 meals a day. This is a space that just recently got created, and this is a medical room. It's not a medical office like you see at the doctors, but this provides dignified health care to our guests, given by the providers that already do this service in our community. Chaz Street Outreach, Providence Community Clinic, the visiting nurses, health care providers can come and see their guests. Nobody wants to do wound care sitting on their bed in front of 30 other people. For us specifically at our 2 scattered site shelters, this is the statistics of how individualized care benefit our community. We've served 406 unique individuals through our centers. 58 people have been housed or placed in long-term care facilities. 16 people are currently receiving recovery-based services, and 31 individuals have been returned and reunited with their family members or support system to care for them, whether that's end-of-life care or that is to provide a space for them to exist that's not on the streets of Spokane. And for us, this is just how you get involved with what we're doing. Or if you are interested in becoming a scattered site model, which Sarah's gonna talk about the RFPs that come out, we as a community have got to step up and participate. We all do a lot of complaining about which service does this and which service does that and where we want them and how we want them. This is an opportunity for our community to step up and say, okay, we can help 30 people in our community. Our services, at least in our shelters, I can't speak for all scattered site shelters, are referral based. So we do not, most people don't know where we are or that we exist in the buildings that we exist in. Through the duration since January, we've had 2 police calls to our locations. We've had 0 overdoses, and we are able to manage our overutilization of the emergency system because we have peers and staff on site to transport these folks to the appointments necessary, which then helps guide folks into the services. We can ensure that they're actually going and participating. And when they're able to have access to these things, you see this new spark of hope come into their eyes. Hey, maybe I am worthy of housing. Maybe I can have this space. Maybe I can get a job. All of the things that were hopeless before then become some kind of a reality to people experiencing homelessness. And someone once told me, my friend Alfredo, once told me the one thing that you cannot live without if you're living on the streets of Spokane is hope. Hope that someday, maybe not today, but someday things can be better.
Questions from the audience right here?
Do you have any plans to expand?
Plans to expand?
We have plans to apply for scattered site RFPs, and I have not seen the RFPs, but I believe they're towards targeted populations. And targeted populations mean things like palliative care for people experiencing homelessness and skilled nursing and recovery services. And Jules Helping Hands is trying to stay within our scope of work. I'm not a recovery specialist. I don't have the skills. I think I would cause more harm than good if we were to jump into the realm of recovery. So we'll support any community member in our community that wants to apply for scattered site shelters. Please call me. We'll show you our policy and procedures. We'll give you tours. We'll tell you what works and what doesn't work, or what we've seen, because this has been an evolution for us throughout the years. As you know, you've seen some of our other shelters and cooling centers, and we learn through doing this what is working and what isn't working. And our model isn't perfect, but it's getting us closer to how we provide real cost-effective services in our community that help and benefit people.
Other questions back here? Oh, and then over here.
You mentioned one of the cons is the community engagement. What's your message so that we might have a message to share of the concerns of security that these people are probably questioning and worried about?
It's been one of the biggest questions that we've had with the neighborhood is, what does the security look like? And Jules Helping Hand does not provide security to our buildings. We have trained staff in de-escalation, but engaging with the community and allowing them to come into your space. So we do community engagement meetings once a month where we invite the community to come out to the centers and engage with the people that live there. We provide a meal. Everybody loves to eat together. And we talk through, what could we do better? What are you seeing that's a problem? And is there a way for us to mitigate so you feel safer? And we haven't had any issues where we couldn't mitigate the person or the neighborhood's concerns. And some of that is just the fear that surrounds homelessness, the narratives that are in our community about what homelessness looks like. And once you bring people into your space and you allow them to interact and see, they tend to open up and go, oh, 30 people. We can handle 30 people. They have a number to call that is answered 24/7. If you see our folks, or any folks really, in the neighborhood that need assistance, call us and we will come out. It is what the service that we've provided this community for many years is, call us and we'll come.
Over on this side of the room, was there a question? Right here.
Yes. Are the shelters overnight right now, or are they becoming 24/7?
All of our scattered site shelters are 24/7. One of the lessons that we've learned in providing the service, because we provided in January and February 4 of these centers at 4 different churches, and one of them was specifically only overnight. We've learned that where do people go during the day, and that alone has the most gigantic impact on the neighborhood in which you exist in, is to ask people to line up and wait for their services. Because with only 30 beds or 20 beds or whatever your scattered site shelter model is that's a limited number of beds. And as we look into our community at the available beds that are needed, we know that there is not enough available beds for people experiencing homelessness nowhere in our community. So those are sought after beds, and you have people will line up for hours just to get inside for 12 hours. So we transitioned all of our shelters over to this 24/7 model where people get help and care during the day and during the night.
One more question over here, Amy.
What is the best way to contact you guys for further questions? I can't really read the email.
If you want, I'll give you my phone number, but I'll also give it to you now. It's area code 509-263-5502. And our referral line number is 509-723-6201. And both of those phone numbers are answered 24 hours a day, and we'll put them out on the coalition listserv.
That PowerPoint will go out later today or early tomorrow morning on the coalition listserv.
And please, I encourage everyone, we need gigantic participation to help make the scattered site shelter model work in our community. And if you're interested in any way in providing that service to the city of Spokane and to the community, please reach out to me. Come out for a tour. I'm happy to walk you through how this works.
Awesome. Thank you so much.